Welcome to the deep dive. We got this really fascinating set of sources sent in by one of you listening, and they all focus on this one specific prophecy. It's in the Old Testament, Deuteronomy. That's the fifth book of the Torah, just for context.
Yes, and it's quite a journey, isn't it? Looking into such an ancient text and how different traditions might see it.
Exactly. So this prophecy, it mentions three specific places. C, which most agree is Sinai, then Seir, and Paran.
That's right.
And our mission today really is to get into this prediction, understand the different ways it's been interpreted over, centuries. So where do we kick off with understanding it?
Well, the first interpretation laid out in the sources, it connects Sinai directly to that huge moment in the Bible.
Moses and the Ten Commandments.
Exactly. Moses getting the commandments from God. That link is pretty fundamental.
Right. Okay. Sinai feels pretty well established there. What about Seir then? How does that fit into this prophecy?
So, Seir. In the Hebrew Bible, it's placed within the region of Edom. And the sources connect Edom to this broader idea of the land of Adam.
Adam.
Yeah, and interestingly, this is also roughly the area where Jesus later preached. The material we have, it actually highlights a link to certain rabbinic ideas about the Messiah.
Oh.
Specifically connecting the Messiah to Edom. So you could maybe see a kind of foreshadowing of Jesus' ministry there in the mention of Seir.
That's interesting how these places start to, connect. And then Paran, this seems like a real fork in the road for interpretations.
It is, definitely. The interpretation we're focusing on now suggests Paran means Arabia.
Arabia, okay.
And there are several points, historical and linguistic, sort of backing this up, like Strong's Bible Dictionary and the Encyclopedia Biblica. They both link Paran to old Arab tribal names, something like Faran.
Faran, right.
And then there's a Jewish commentary, Sifta Burim, which explicitly connects Paran to the Arabic language itself.
Those are pretty strong linguistic ties. And didn't the sources mention more historical context, too?
They did, yeah. An old Jewish text, the Book of Jubilees, it actually links Paran with Ishmael.
Ishmael, who's seen as a forefather of the Arabs.
Exactly. So this idea Paran equals Arabia seems to have, some historical roots and different understandings.
Okay, so if we're going with Paran as Arabia here, the prophecy talks about light shining forth at Mount Paran. What's that supposed to mean?
Right. This is where it gets really specific. The material points us to Jabal Nur in Mecca.
Jabal Nur.
Which in Arabic literally means mountain of light.
Ah, okay.
And this mountain is hugely important in Islam because it's where the Prophet Muhammad is believed to have received the first revelations of the Quran in a cave there.
So the light shining forth from Paran could be seen as the Quran being revealed in Mecca on the mountain light. That's, quite a link geographically and religiously.
It is.
How might Jewish communities in Arabia back then have understood this connection, potentially?
Well, the argument presented is that, Jewish people there, hearing Muhammad's claims about divine messages on this specific mountain of light, they might have seen a possible fit with this prophecy from Deuteronomy.
Because Jabal Nur was a known landmark, and now it's tied to this new religious event.
Exactly. It potentially lines up.
So this sets up a kind of sequence. The Torah at Sinai, then Jesus' teachings may be linked to Seradim, and then the Quran in Paran, Arabia. It's presented like a chronology of divine messages.
Precisely. And the source material, it uses this quite vivid metaphor of light getting stronger.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, God came from Sinai, like dawn breaking, then rose up from Seir, like the sun getting higher, and finally shined forth from Mount Paran, like the sun at its absolute brightest.
Representing the Quran as the final, maybe most complete message in this view.
That's the idea being presented, yes.
Yeah.
Symbolizing increasing intensity.
And then the sources also mention the historical spread of Islam afterwards, like this light spreading out from Paran.
Suggesting the guidance spread far and wide.
Okay, so that's the basic framework. Now let's dig into the specific details about Paran in Deuteronomy itself.
Okay, so the prophecy says someone from Paran comes with 10,000 holy ones, or saints, and brings a fiery law.
10,000 saints and a fiery law. Let's unpack those.
Right. First, the number. The Hebrew word used is rababa.
Rababa.
Now, it literally means 10,000. But crucially, it can also mean just a very large number, like a vast multitude, maybe uncountable.
Ah, so it could be literal 10,000, or it could just mean loads of people.
Exactly. It has that flexibility. Now, how does this connect to Muhammad?
Yeah.
The material links this directly to the conquest of Mecca. This was a major event. When Prophet Muhammad returned to Mecca after being away, He came back with, well, roughly 10,000 followers.
Wow. Okay. That number lines up pretty closely, whether it's literal or symbolic.
That's the argument. It's presented as a direct fulfillment of that part of the prophecy.
And what about them being called holy ones or saints? How's that interpreted?
Well, the text highlights the huge sacrifices Muhammad's early companions made. Their dedication, enduring persecution, leaving homes.
Right, their commitment.
Yeah, their deep commitment is presented as making them saintly in the context of this prophecy.
Okay. And the fiery law from Paran, that seems pretty pointed.
It does. It's interpreted as the Quran,
A holy book of Islam.
which Muslims believe is God's word revealed to Muhammad. So again, you see these pieces. The place, Paran Arabia, the large group of followers, 10,000 Rababa, their character, holy ones, and a divine law, fiery law Quran, all argued to align with Islam's beginnings.
It certainly presents a very coherent picture based on the sources. Now, there was also that story, wasn't there, about a Jewish perspective around the time of Muhammad?
Yes, that's a fascinating account. It describes an interaction in Medina between Prophet Muhammad and a Jewish man.
Okay.
And this man reportedly saw parallels between Muhammad and prophecies he knew from the Torah and the angel of the gospel.
What kind of parallels?
He apparently mentioned 3 specific things: the prophet's homeland, the number of his followers, and their characteristics.
Okay, homeland, number, characteristics. How did his understanding match the Deuteronomy interpretation we've been discussing?
Well, he identified Mecca as the expected homeland for this prophet. That fits right in with Paran being Arabia.
Right.
Then for the number, the story says the Jewish man mentioned something about 70,000 followers entering paradise without judgment.
70,000, not 10,000.
Right, different number. But the source material explains that in ancient Near Eastern literature, this includes Jewish texts and Islamic hadith. 2 big round numbers like 70,000 were often used symbolically.
Ah, like the Rababa, meaning a multitude.
Exactly. It wasn't necessarily about the precise count, but about conveying a huge uncountable number. So 70,000 here is seen as serving the same symbolic purpose as the 10,000, or Rababa, indicating a vast following.
Got it. So symbolically similar. And the third point, their characteristics.
The description of them entering paradise without being held accountable. That's seen as echoing the holy ones or saints description in Deuteronomy. Both point to a community of, exceptionally devoted people.
And it's striking that this account from someone contemporary to Muhammad seems to echo the same points as this Deuteronomy interpretation.
It is. And the source even notes that the order he mentioned them in homeland, then number, then characteristics, matches the order in Deuteronomy 33.
Really? That's quite specific.
Yeah, it's presented as significant evidence suggesting this prophecy, or at least this understanding of it, was circulating and known back then.
Okay. But of course, interpretations of ancient texts are rarely unanimous. The material brings in counter-arguments, particularly from Maimonides. He's a major Jewish scholar.
Hugely influential, yes.
Yeah.
From the Middle Ages. And he had 2 main objections to this interpretation linking the prophecy to Muhammad.
What were they?
Okay, first was linguistic, grammar. He pointed out that Deuteronomy 33 uses the past tense, shone forth. So he argued it must be talking about something that already happened, not a future event like Muhammad appearing centuries later.
Makes sense from a purely grammatical standpoint. How do the sources respond to that?
They bring up something called the prophetic perfect tense. It's apparently a known feature in biblical Hebrew.
Prophetic perfect. Okay.
Yeah, the idea is that sometimes future events, things God has decreed and are considered absolutely certain, are described using the past tense. It's like saying it's done to show it's guaranteed.
Okay, so it emphasizes the certainty of the future event.
Exactly. The example often given is Noah entering the ark. Sometimes the text uses past tense verbs before it happens in the narrative, just to show it's definitely going to happen.
Right.
Plus, the source points to a very similar prophecy in the book of Habakkuk. But that one is in the future tense. God shall come from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran.
Ah, so a parallel prophecy uses the future tense.
Suggesting that Deuteronomy 33, using the past tense, might indeed be employing that prophetic perfect for a future event. And just as a side note, Teman is often geographically linked with Seir.
Okay, that addresses the tense issue. What was Maimonides' second objection?
His other main point was geographical, about the focus. He argued the real center of God's revelation in that passage is Mount Sinai. That's where the glory was fully revealed.
So Seir and Paran were secondary.
He suggested the light mentioned at Seir and Paran were just, reflections or lesser echoes of the main event at Sinai, not distinct revelations themselves.
One big light source at Sinai with ripples outwards. How does the source material counter that?
Well, it goes back to the specific words used in Deuteronomy. That progression came from Sinai, rose up from Seir, shined forth from Paran.
The increasing intensity again.
Right. That gradual brightening doesn't really fit well with just reflections from one source. If anything, reflections usually get dimmer, right?
Good point.
And then there's the Habakkuk prophecy again. It mentions Taman, Seir, and Paran, but completely leaves out Sinai.
It omits Sinai altogether.
Yeah, which kind of suggests Sinai might not be the sole or even primary focus of this particular line of prophecy. The source even brings in Barnes' notes on the Bible, suggesting this omission might hint at a new lawgiver like Moses, but coming from somewhere else.
Interesting that other biblical commentary picks up on that too.
Exactly. And the source mentions other rabbis apparently question the things too, like why use 3 different verbs: came, rose up, shine forth. Why not just one?
And the word order changes too, right?
Yeah, the action comes before the place for Seir and Paran. Rose up from Seir, shines forth from Paran. But not for Sinai. Came from Sinai. Little linguistic details they noticed.
So how does the interpretation linking it all to the Torah, Injil, and Quran handle these finer points?
Well, the argument is that seeing it as 3 distinct revelations at different times and places, culminating in the Quran from Paran, Arabia, it actually makes sense of these variations. The different verbs and word order could reflect the different stages and natures of these divine communications.
So the different nuances actually support the multi-revelation view in this interpretation.
That's the contention, yes.
So the takeaway seems to be that even someone as learned as Maimonides, a huge figure in Jewish thought, had trouble completely dismissing this interpretation, connecting the Deuteronomy prophecy to Muhammad and Islam.
That does seem to be a key point the source material makes. That despite his strong arguments, the alternative view, drawing on linguistics, history, and other scriptures, presents a resilient case. It really highlights the ongoing conversation around this ancient text.
Wow, this has really been, well, a deep dive, hasn't it, into just one prophecy in Deuteronomy. We've looked at the interpretations linking Sinai, Seir, Paran to key moments.
Moses, Jesus, Muhammad.
Right. Then we zoomed in on Paran, the details about the 10,000 saints, the fiery law, and the potential fulfillment in Islam. We heard that contemporary Jewish perspective.
From Medina, yeah.
And then tackled Maimonides' objections and the counter-arguments about tense and geography. It just shows how many layers of meaning and history are packed into these old texts.
Absolutely. It really shows how one passage can resonate differently across different faiths and times.
So as we finish up, maybe here's something for you, the listener, to think about. Considering all these different viewpoints we've discussed, what does this ancient prophecy suggest to you about how religious traditions might be, I don't know, interconnected?
Or maybe, how does exploring these diverse readings of sacred texts change how we see history or belief itself?
Good questions. Lots to mull over.
Definitely invites more thought.
Indeed. And if you do want to explore this further, the book Abraham Fulfilled was mentioned as one of the key sources for today's discussion. Well, thanks for joining us on this exploration today.
Thank you.
Until the next deep dive.